This is the Indigenous Environmental Network. For more information, go to ienearth.org.
We're gonna go ahead and get started, as people can go ahead and just come back when they're able to. We don't have too much time left. We're talking 17 minutes, and so I'm just kind of want to get a temperature check. So I recently did a carbon market training full scale. It's a 2-hour it's a 3-hour 2-session training. And I recently provided that training to the Cheyenne River Tribe in South Dakota, but it was like a week after I got back from the subsidiary body meeting of the UNFCCC in Germany. And so I was like speaking really technical. And so one of the feedbacks I got was, you need to tone down on the technical talk of this. And so I wanted to do the carbon pricing 101 to try to do a base level. So this is the very first time that I've ever done it this way. It did not go the way that I intended it to go. I found us kind of getting more technical because that's kind of how this is. And so I was just kind of wanting to get a temperature check of this last 15 minutes. If there's any questions or anything that we can go over that can help you get a clearer understanding of where we're at in this moment. And I will have these trainings again tomorrow and the next day, and then the full carbon mark. Well, not the full, but another 1.5 hour training that is more technical. That's really diving into the UNFCCC and the Paris Climate Agreement and how that's affecting the United States through the IRA, and how that relates to us in the climate justice work, and where we need to maneuver and build unity and start strategizing on, because we're seeing build out of these fault solution projects. We will see build out of, we didn't even touch on nuclear, on hydrogen. There's a lot of different issues that are facing us. We have tribal members and communities that are being devastated with lithium mining, which is for the push for for electric cars. So it's a whole nother piece of the conversation that's still out there. So if anybody has any questions or concerns or comments, please.
So my question would be, is there any scenario where carbon pricing leads to an indigenous just transition? Is there any scenario where this actually might be a viable solution that you can think of?
Yeah. Yes or no? Now, this is my perspective, and this is also the stance of the Indigenous Environmental Network. But when we see what really needs to happen to address climate change at scale is a system change. We can't continue to replicate the problems that has caused climate change. We can't continue to use this as a foundation to address climate change at scale. And so if we're going to continue to commodify our Mother Earth, if we're going to create policy off of capitalizing off of some communities suffer and some communities don't, then it won't change. If we simply change off of fossil fuel and create another energy giant that continues to replicate the same relationships that the fossil fuel industry had with Mother Earth, we're going to continue to experience not only harm in our communities, but the destruction of the sacredness of our Mother Earth. And so I don't see any pathway forward where carbon markets and carbon pricing and the flexible mechanisms is going to result in any real substantial change. Will communities be able to benefit off of the money that they obtain? Maybe. That's a maybe. The Yurok tribal membership has seen $0 of their 4 carbon market projects. The people have seen $0. This is replicated across the globe when we're talking about these carbon markets. The money never gets to the people that are most directly affected. So that's a maybe they may see benefit from that money. Most likely they won't. And they're going to receive benefit for the harm that's going to be caused to others. Others being indigenous people being removed from their land. Others being your kids not being able to live on this planet because it's being destroyed, and so there's no pathway forward that carbon markets can relieve us from any type of injustices or climate change at scale or climate solution at scale.
Thank you. I'm curious if, besides a system change, if there are any forms of renewable energy that you see are viable.
I see it as like every community looks different, right? Just like we're not all like one Indian tribe speaking one Indian language with one feather in our hair. We're all unique and different. So are our regions and our communities. And so what may be viable for my community for energy source may look different from somebody that lives in the high desert or somebody that lives along, somewhere else that has a lot of wind or something, I think we really need to be able to tear down those energy companies and have that energy be sourced locally for the people. There's a neighboring tribe out on the coastline that fought a wind pipeline, and not because they were against wind, they were putting on a sacred site, but we were bringing information forward showing them that this electricity that they're going to make from this wind is going to be shipped to San Francisco, where they're going to lose 34% of that energy source because it's being shipped, and our communities aren't even going to benefit from it.
So as an activist, one of the things that I do is I really encourage indigenous technology. And every region has their own housing situation that they created that was sustainable. It doesn't matter where you go, from the Amazon to the Arctic. They have sustainable living structures already, and that's what we're really pushing to go back forward. People always look at me crazy because I'm a Plains Indian, right? Like I'm a Lakota, Dakota. We use teepees, right? And our structure is different than the Cheyenne, how they put up a teepee. They're also Plain Indians, and they have a teepee similar to ours, but our structures are still different, but they're both sustainable for what that tribe needs. And that's why I always encourage. And for people to start looking at previous technology before colonization and how we were utilizing it and how we can continue utilizing it in modern day right now. There's like anytime you open up a history book, it goes from 1492, right? And it goes all the way down to 1730. Well, what happened within that 300 years? It was when Europeans were learning to adapt to our lifestyle, when they were learning our food systems, when they were learning our sustainable living at that time. But they kept wanting more. And that's why there's a 300-year gap in our own history books, right? And this is where they obtained all that knowledge, even down to our medicine. So when people talk about repatriation, I'm always like, you got to start pushing pharmaceuticals to return money for repatriation. Tylenol comes straight out of the Plains Indian area. It's the yellow willow bark, right? Can you imagine if Johnson & Johnson repatriated back to the Lakota tribe? Like how much that would influence and develop within our... But I'm just saying, like, that's an example. Like when we talk about repatriation, it's our medicine, it's our star knowledge, it's everything, including our technology. And so being sustainable is the number one priority of any indigenous person globally.
Thank you. When we think about like solutions and system change, it also makes us like reflect personally, right? Like, are we ready for that? Are we willing to do that? Honestly, we really don't have a choice. We can make that conscious decision now and hopefully come up with a pathway forward of the least painful path, or we're going to be forced to. It might not be, you personally, but it's definitely going to be your lineage. And it might be some of us personally, depending on where you live and what your age is. I'm sure in the Midwest, you guys are not going to experience the wildfires we do in California. Like, there's people in California that are losing their lives to this already.
But, we're Tornado Alley.
Yeah.
You're not going to experience, like, tornadoes going on. Like, coming here, I left in a tornado.
Yeah. So, like, this is already moving forward. And it is a hard conversation, because there is people that are in favor of this. There is people's jobs that are literally to push this, to get tribal nations to accept carbon markets or a pathway forward. A lot of resistance that I hear from organizations is like, well, we respect self-determination and tribal sovereignty. The tribe has their own inherent right to decide what's the best interest for themselves. They'll say that they have that sovereign right. But as indigenous people, as any sovereign nation, not even just indigenous peoples, as a sovereign nation, that also comes with accountability and responsibility. You can't hide behind your sovereignty saying we're going to move with and support this tribe because that's their sovereign right to support carbon markets. No. They're neglecting their accountability to for future tribal members, and they're neglecting their responsibility to our Mother Earth and protecting the sacred and what actually makes us indigenous. What about that responsibility? What about your accountability to your future tribal members? So you can't hide behind the sovereignty flag with, this is greater than that. And you think about, you'll have tribal nations like, well, we have the right for self-development, We need this money. Well, actually, if you were to organize and you're to get the federal government to respect the treaties they've made with you people, that's really not our fault, the federal government not abiding by those treaties. It's really citizens of the United States, non-indigenous peoples. When we think of treaties, we think of like, oh, that's the U.S. government and Indian tribes. They need to figure that out. No, we made treaties with the citizens of the United States and your representatives. As a citizen of the United States, those are your treaties just as much as it's mine. So you need to honor your treaties as a citizen of the United States. Honor the treaties you have with my people. And we won't be pushed into a predicament where we have to undermine and sell out our traditional values in order to provide the basic needs of life for our citizens.
So when it comes to carbon markets, one thing you just, all of us have to acknowledge that every aspect of our life, it's included. So it really shocked me because I'm an indigenous birth worker, and I've been a birth worker for the last 8 years, and it really shocked me when the studies came out that they're using breastfeeding, and I was like, why? We're barely getting mothers to understand how important it is to breastfeed, and there's we have to be inclusive, right? Because there's some mothers that cannot, and that's okay. And we're trying to stress that too. It's okay if you cannot, but we're the ones that are able to, they were really encouraging to breastfeed. And I'm like, why? How far is it going to go? Everything has a price, and that's devastating. That's really, really devastating. Everything has a price now.
Can you explain how the logic of how breastfeeding can offset?
Because they're not so. Right. There is no logic, exactly. But the other thing is when you think of Similac, those are all carbon-based plants that are making formula right now. And so cows is another one.
So if a woman does it, she's doing that, she's not using as much carbon.
Exactly. But that comes down to everything, though, again.
We just want to capture all the audio. Sorry.
Have you had any luck addressing the tribes in Oklahoma? Because there's so many in Oklahoma, and what I've seen, even though I haven't lived in Oklahoma for a while, is that once one tribe sees success in another tribe, it's kind of like, oh, hey, we should get on that bandwagon. Whereas trying to talk to each one of those tribes, because we act independently.
So the quick answer to that is no. Our tribal governments are governments that are forced upon us. They're colonial style democracy, so-called democracy setup governments. And with that process comes patriarchy. And with that process also comes the democratic process of electing our leaders. When that happens, an elected official's primary goal is re-election. And then comes the care for their people and their environment and job creation. But their first goal is re-election. And when that's the mindset of these governing bodies, they see carbon markets as actually as a good thing, because it will bring revenue in. And some of that revenue, they get to say where they get to use it. And so some of that revenue will be used as to entice people to vote for them. So, we got this lump sum of money. How about I create this job for your family and you can get your whole crew to vote for me? That happens. Not just with carbon market money, with any kind of money in our tribal governments. It's a system that is not our way of being, and so it's hard to rely on them. Not saying that there isn't tribal governments that oppose carbon markets, because there are, but it takes the initiative of their citizens to make that happen. We would like to be able to create a policy within our own tribe that hopefully other tribes would mimic, that we won't have to fight this every election time. Because every time we have an election, the carbon market conversation comes back up. Every time a new broker comes into our region. Now, these brokers, they're not just, some businessman coming in and offering you a good deal. They'll study your constitution and figure out a way of undermining it so that it'll never have to go to a public vote. A lot of our tribe has policies in place. A lot of our tribal governing governments have policies in place where if it's to a certain dollar amount, that the people get a vote on it. They'll undermine that by your general assembly. They'll put it on the agenda, but when it comes up, they won't speak about it. They'll say, that's a misprint. We didn't mean to talk about that. We're moving on to item blah, blah, blah. And so when the carbon market is being discussed later on and it's signed or passed, then they can say, it was on the agenda. So these tactics are being used. These companies will also come into your community and hire within and say, Pat, you're a tribal member of this tribe. How about we give you $50,000 if we can get your to employ you so that you can work 20 hours a week and get your community to support this carbon market. And if your tribe signs it, we'll give you a $100,000 bonus. That's what's going on in these tribal communities.
One thing I did see work was they were trying to get the Southern Cheyenne Rappos to sign on for a casino in Colorado, where Sand Creek. They were going to make Sand Creek a national park and then a big casino next door. They got defeated because they didn't go through the tribe. There's more chiefs coming on now. What the United States did was they took away our chief system. They put in a tribal council that bypassed the chief's decision, which was always our tradition. And it seems like now we're getting younger people in. My nephew's a Arapaho chief. He's not even 30 yet. They're getting more young with educations. I always wondered if, kids would use that again, just like it happened. They didn't get their casino at Sand Creek.
Yeah, our traditional methods of governing is what will work. It has worked for us for thousands of years, and it's what's going to work for us now. And that method forward needs to be uplifted. I know that the Lakotas have the Standing Rock tribe, and I believe the Cheyenne River tribe as well. I don't want to speak for on behalf of you, but they have agreed to move back to traditional means of governance, but it hasn't yet been implemented. We rely on our tribal leaders at home through the democratic process of making sure that we have our tribal members elected to our council that hold our cultural values at the utmost. And then that's what they stand on. That's why we vote for them, because we know that they will protect the cultural integrity of our people and our tribe. When we had a carbon broker a couple years ago, they stopped coming to our community because we're a hard no. But a couple years ago came, and our council's like, they're just here to talk, Thomas. Don't freak out. It's okay. We're just here to have a conversation. It's like, I'm just here to listen and to make sure nothing's signed. That's all I'm here to do. And my mom's like, we don't have to be nice to this guy. And this guy's like, what? And he's standing there with his fancy shoes on and everything. And mom's all, you're the same as the 49er gold diggers that came before. We know your kind. We know that you're here to basically rape and pillage our land, our people, like the gold miners that came before you. That's all you're here for, is for a massive payout. So my mom ran him off.
Back to the 101 part of it all. So carbon brokers work for the federal government, or they're private entities? What's the system that's actually in place, or does it even vary?
Excellent question. So there's a non-voluntary market and a voluntary market. And so there is the voluntary market is I stated this earlier with somebody that the youngest the smallest contract that we've seen is 30 years. Most of them are 40 to 60 years. That's a non-voluntary market where you have a coffee shop downtown that says we're going net zero by 2030 or we're going net zero by 2025, or they claim net zero right now. Everything you buy in this store has been offset. There's no carbon emissions being used because we offset it. That they're buying into a voluntary market where they're voluntarily doing it. Then there's non-voluntary markets which is ran by, in the United States, there's only, I believe, 2 major ones, which is the California Cap and Trade program. And California Cap and Trade is not a carbon market, but there is not a cap and trade program that exists without a carbon market. And so that's a whole not 101 conversation that we didn't step into yet. But you have the cap and trade, which is like, we're going to cap your emissions here. Like the state of California will say, Chevron, you cannot go beyond this. This is your cap for your emissions. But if somebody wants to trade you some of their offsets, then you can go up and beyond that, or you can purchase some offsets through this market mechanism over here and go beyond that. And so then that's how they get beyond that cap, and they all get beyond the cap. The brokers make commissions, and they work for broking companies, and they're huge and they're all over. There's a lot of them. There's tribal brokering companies that are just focused on tribal tribal communities. But when you think of like the United States, indigenous lands, like your reservation's how big? The third largest. So you're talking thousands and thousands of acres. Why not go and speak to that one tribe and get a huge contract versus going to someone's public home that has 5 or 6 trees in their backyard? Or a city park that can be used as an offset. A lot of universities are getting into offset projects because they have a lot of land base as well.
There's a term other than brokers. It's floated. They call them carbon cowboys. And you can just Google that. There's some really good articles about how they have swindled, so many businesses, countries, and people by just making shit up. They will show places on maps and sell them to, people, entities, companies, etc., that are part of a national park, for example. and really, if no one's there's no mechanism to check, right? There's no policing system. There's no system to punish. It's really like that's why they use the cowboy, right? It's just an open bonanza of see what you can get away with.
There's been some brokers that have created these check organizations. And so you'll have hey, we keep on we're all brokers, all of us over here. And we're like, all these people are talking trash about us, saying we're just creating stuff, making it up. Let's get an organization together that will make sure that our stuff is legit and that we're doing it correctly. And so then this organization will form. They'll be like, yeah. So these people are going to check our work. But you know where those people get their money? From us. It's just another facade, another layer to the BS and lies. 30 years ago? 30 plus probably now. Do you know Alberto? First red project?
Well, the permit convention was adopted in 92.
So yeah, take it back to there.
But when you get a full-blown convention, that means that prior to that, there was a realization that there was a problem, and they got all these experts to do the convention, and write the drafts, and do peer reviews. So you're talking even way before that they knew it was a problem. And so they had all that time too to figure out things.
Yeah, they're definitely not new. Yeah.
One of the things that occurred to me is we criticize governments for making the wrong decisions. That doesn't mean that we can't criticize tribal governments for making the wrong decisions. And that's one thing that kind of escapes the Indian Law Resource Center and NARP or national, whatever it is, thought that it's their right of self-determination to make their own decisions. But if that decision is wrong, then we have a right to criticize it. And I think as Tom was pointing out earlier, in this tribe, when you see a tribe making the wrong decision, he takes it to the press. The other thing is about three-part and focus. It's kind of like a two-edged sword because
It's not binding. You say no, and the next year they're back. And then you say no again, and they come back, and they come back, and they continue to come back to try and get you to change your mind, or they'll hire other agents keep coming back. And that's the problem in some places, because finally people say, well, fucking, let's get rid of them and let's do something.
If I had a tribal chairman tell me, Thomas, you know we didn't create this mess.
Yeah.
Climate change is not our fault. Why should we have to be the ones held accountable? Why should we have to be the ones to fix it?
Yeah.
Can't we just take this money and make them, you know they're not going to change. You know they're going to drive us into the ground. You know. In the meantime, can we take this money and benefit? You know. And he wasn't our tribal chairman very much longer.
What were people's response to that, though? Because I mean, I can see how some people would think he does have a point, but obviously he's just passing the buck. Obviously, everything all comes into that.
Yeah, good point. That is a mindset of a lot of people, because as Indigenous people, it is real. We did not create this mess. Why are we the ones being the ones having to be accountable for it?
The reason I asked too is people that I descend from, Paiute-Shoshone, particularly in the Seneca, we have this thing called the two-row wampum, and I hear a lot of my people say that we don't get involved in the American government. I'm like, this is our one opportunity to at least hold them accountable. And you're not going to get involved? Are you joking? Right? But they have a point too. It's not our mess, and I'm just wondering how.
Yeah. So it's well received, but in the same limelight, it's like we know that the real solutions to addressing climate change at scale is heavily embedded in the Indigenous knowledge from our communities, and us coming together as humanity collectively together to address climate change and move those solutions forward. We have to participate in the solutions. We have to be in these spaces at the UN, FCCC, the CBD COP. We have to be there. It's kind of our obligation and duty. Even though we're not responsible for it, we are going to be the first ones to be affected by it at the greatest scale. And we know that they can't do it without us. You know,
Look what happens when we're not able,
right?
We're not involved. Look at the devastation that happens, as opposed to at least if we're there, we can at least hold them accountable in some way.
Right.
You know, so.
there's also human rights dimensions to this too. When you commodify carbon,
You're putting a price on it makes it a valuable commodity, whereas if the results are if a tribe gets into some sort of carbon market, they're really losing their sovereignty. But not only that, they're affecting the health of their community. They're affecting their own self-determination, their own right of sovereignty, and they're really interfering with the relationship to the land. Because they're selling their land, or they're renting it. They say, well, we're only renting it. Well, they're creating a division between the tribe and its relationship to the earth. So there's a lot of dimensions to this.
And so I had these cards that I made up for this. Thank you, Alberto. And it goes through like what is biodiversity, what is BECS, what is biofuels, CCS, carbon offsets, LNG, net zero. You know, we're going to do that in the next basic carbon pricing 101. So feel free to come back to be continued. Yes, and I'm going to try to make it a little bit less technical again. Try a second wave. That's why we're doing it every day. I'm get better at this, breaking it down. But if there's any more questions and dire questions, let's have it, and then we can call it a day.
Thank you. This has been like so illuminating. I had no idea about this stuff when I came and sat down at the tent. And the reason I came was because my partner in Colombia, who indigenous part of the Pastuso tribe, he sent me a message this morning. Oh, you're at a conference talking about all that kind of stuff. Cool. Hey, could you get some information about like carbon offsets, because in our community some people are saying it's not a thing, it's not like a good thing, and I think I've done some research and I think it could be good. I don't know, can you get some information? So I come here, I sit down, I'm horrified, and I also know that it's gonna take something for me to be able to explain how complicated and why this actually is not going to benefit him in that community. And I'm walking away from this wondering, how do I communicate this? Where are the resources? And where are the literal 101 version of this information? Because this was a lot of information. It was good. It gave me the context. But for me to be able to relay it simply, directly, and in another language, like, I need help. So please.
Yes. And I feel like I've failed now because this is supposed to be the Carbon 101. No, but yes, I hear that. And we do have resources that are available. They're probably here in the tent. I'll make sure that I bring some to the next training as well. It's called Hoodwinking the Hot House. There's carbon pricing booklet 1, carbon pricing booklet 2. So there is literature. We do have it translated into Spanish, Portuguese, Arabic, French, and English. And so those are available. I would recommend getting them. But it is going to take a lot of self-motivation to understand this. The next training will go through these terms and break down what these terms mean. There's also a piece in there on, we have it set up like a media, like you're being interviewed and being asked these questions so that I feel like the first time to articulate it is always the hardest. And so if we start articulating it here collectively in this space, and you telling me what carbon pricing is, and you telling me why it's bad, then that kind of helps practice. So when you go home, you're able to articulate it a little bit better. That you got the first one out of the way. So it's kind of like an interview process. We could do it different ways, but you're on the panel, and I'll be like, so wouldn't this money really benefit your tribal community by signing on to this contract? And don't you support nature-based solutions? Doesn't that just make sense that nature has the solutions? So then you're able to counter it, and because I use all those tricky words. But thank you for your time. Thanks, and I again invite you back for the next session, and enjoy the rest of your evening.
You've been listening to the Indigenous Environmental Network. For more information, go to ienearth.org.